Before you scroll past this, stop right here because what you are about to witness is not just advice. It is the exact moment everything shifted between Bai Lu, Miles Wei, and Shen Yue, and if you stay with the story until the very end, you're going to understand why one quiet conversation changed everything no one was ready to face. So subscribe right now and stay with every second because this story unfolds in a way that will stay with you long after it ends. It did not begin with tension. It did not begin with confrontation. It began with silence. The kind of silence that lingers longer than it should. The kind that fills a room even when people are speaking. Miles Wei sat across from Bai Lu in a quiet corner of a private space that felt removed from everything else. No cameras, no audience, just two people and a conversation that had been waiting to happen. He had not planned to talk about it. Not directly.
Not openly.
But some emotions refused to stay hidden. And that was exactly what happened. Bai Lu noticed it immediately. Not because he said anything, but because of the way he carried himself. The pauses, the way his attention drifted, the way his words felt incomplete. She had seen it before, not in him, but in others. The look of someone holding on to something that was already slipping away. And she understood. Before he even spoke. When he finally did, it was not a confession. It was not a dramatic release. It was simple. He mentioned Shen Yue, not with excitement, not with anger, but with something softer. Something unresolved. And that was enough. Because sometimes a single name carries an entire story with it. Bai Lu did not respond immediately. She let the moment breathe. Let his words settle. Because rushing into a conversation like this changes its meaning. And she did not want to change it. She wanted to understand it. Miles Wei continued.
Not because he wanted to,
but because he needed to. He spoke about what could have been. About moments that felt close to something real. About the space between what happened and what never did. And in those words, everything became clear. This was not about confusion. This was about attachment. The kind that does not fade easily. The kind that stays even when everything else has moved forward. Bai Lu listened, not interrupting, not correcting, just present. Because presence is what allows truth to come out fully. And when he finished, the silence returned. But this time it was different. Not heavy, not uncertain, but waiting. Waiting for something that needed to be said. She looked at him, not with judgment, not with sympathy, but with clarity. And when she spoke, her voice was calm, not harsh, not emotional, just honest. She told him to let go. Not abruptly, not as a command, but as a truth. She said that holding on to something that no longer exists does not bring it back. It only keeps you from moving forward. Miles Wei did not react immediately. Not because he disagreed, but because hearing something like that is never easy. Even when it is true. He asked her if it was really that simple. If moving on could be reduced to just a decision. And Bai Lu did not dismiss the question. She understood it. Because she knew the answer was not simple. But it was necessary. She told him that moving on is not about forgetting. It is not about pretending something never mattered. It is about accepting that it no longer belongs in your future. And that is what makes it difficult. Not the act itself, but the acceptance behind it. The room felt still again. But this time, the stillness carried understanding. Miles Wei looked down for a moment. Not lost, not broken, but thinking, really thinking. In a way that showed he was finally seeing things clearly. He admitted something then. Something he had not said out loud before. He said he knew it was over. He knew there was nothing left to hold on to. But he had not been ready to admit it to himself. And that was the turning point. Because recognition changes everything. Once you see something clearly, you cannot go back to not seeing it. Bai Lu did not push further. She did not add more. Because she knew she did not need to. The truth had already done its work. The conversation did not end dramatically. There was no sudden resolution. No immediate transformation. But something had shifted. Something important. Miles Wei did not leave with answers. But he left with clarity. And that is often more powerful. Because clarity leads to change. even if it takes time. Days passed, and the world outside continued as usual. But internally, something was different. Miles Wei began to move differently. Not in obvious ways, but in small ones. He spoke less about the past, thought less about what could have been, and slowly, without forcing it, he began to let go. Not completely, not instantly, but
Genuinely.
and that is what made it real. Bai Lu did not follow up,
She did not check in.
because she trusted what she had said. And more importantly, she trusted that he would understand it in his own time. Shen Yue remained distant from the conversation, not involved, not aware of the details, because sometimes the most important changes happen without everyone being present. The story does not end with a reunion. It does not end with a dramatic twist. It ends with something quieter, but far more meaningful. A moment where someone finally accepts what they already knew and chooses to move forward instead of staying where they no longer belong. And now the only question that remains is this. When someone tells you to let go of something you are not ready to lose, do you resist it? Or do you trust that letting go might be the only way to find something better? If this story made you feel something real and you want to see more moments like this, make sure you subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who understands that sometimes the hardest advice is the one that changes everything. The moment she told him to let go should have ended everything, but if you stay with this until the very end, you're going to understand why that single sentence from Bai Lu did not close the story between her, Miles Wei, and Shen Yue. It actually forced something much deeper to finally come to the surface. Miles Wei did not respond right away. Not because he disagreed, but because the truth has a way of settling slowly.
It does not hit all at once.
It unfolds, and in that moment, he was feeling every part of it. The silence between them stretched, but it was no longer uncomfortable. It was reflective, the kind of silence where something inside you begins to shift. He leaned back slightly, looking away for a moment. Not to avoid her, but to process what she had just said. Because letting go is not just a decision. It is a process. One that requires you to confront everything you have been holding on to. He finally spoke, but his voice was quieter than before. He asked her how she knew. How she knew it was time. How she knew he was holding on to something that was already gone. Bai Lu did not answer immediately. She smiled slightly, not out of amusement, but understanding. Because she had been there before. Not in the same situation, but in the same feeling. She told him that you do not always know right away. Sometimes you just feel it. In the way things change. In the way conversations become shorter. In the way effort becomes one-sided. And, most importantly, in the way you start holding on to memories instead of creating new ones. That was what made it clear. Miles Wei lowered his gaze. Not defeated, not broken, but aware. He realized something in that moment. Something he had been avoiding. He had not been holding on to Shen Yue. He had been holding on to the version of her that existed in his mind. The version that made everything feel possible. The version that had never fully existed in reality. And that realization changed everything. Because once you see the difference between what is real and what you imagined, you cannot go back. The conversation did not become emotional. There were no raised voices. No dramatic confessions. Just understanding. And that is what made it powerful. Because the most important moments are not always loud. They are quiet. But they stay with you. Later that night, Miles Wei found himself alone. Not in a crowded space. Not distracted. Just alone with his thoughts. And for the first time, he did not try to replay every moment. He did not try to analyze what went wrong. He simply accepted it. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough. Enough to take the next step forward. Days passed, and the shift became more visible. Not to everyone, but to those who paid attention. He no longer brought up Shen Yue in conversations. He no longer lingered in moments that reminded him of what could have been. Instead, he focused on what was in front of him, on what was real, and that was the beginning of something new. Not a sudden transformation, but a gradual change.
The kind that lasts.
Bai Lu watched from a distance. Not interfering, not checking in constantly, because she knew her role in the story was not to guide him forever. It was to say what needed to be said at the right time, and then step back. Shen Yue remained unchanged in the narrative, not because she was unaware, but because her role in his story had already reached its end. Whether he accepted it or not, the final moment came quietly, not with a confrontation, not with a reunion, but with a simple message. Miles Wei typed it slowly, not rushing, not overthinking, just writing what he felt. He thanked Shen Yue, not for what happened, but for what he learned. He told her he was moving forward, not because he forgot, but because he understood. And then he sent it, no expectation of a reply, no need for closure from her side, because he had already found it within himself. That was the true ending, not dramatic, not explosive, but real. And that is what made it powerful, because the hardest part of letting go is not losing someone. It is accepting that you are ready to move on. And now the only question that remains is this. When you finally realize you have been holding on to something that no longer exists, do you keep holding on? Or do you choose to move forward even if it feels unfamiliar? If this continuation made you feel something real and you want more stories like this, make sure you subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who understands that sometimes the most powerful endings are not loud. They are quiet decisions that change everything forever.